became monk at the age of 9. I choose to become monk by myself. I don't know the reason why I wanted to become monk, and I strongly believe that it's a karma also, that you have a strong connections past karma that you really want to be, so you really urge. There's no reason, but you just want it. One day anyway, I think Lama Zopa was there in my village. I think I asked my parents to give permission to become a monk. And then I think my father went to Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and then he asked whether he can become a monk or not. So he checked divinations, and the Lama Zopa says, okay.
At a certain level, what monks, particularly in the Buddhist context, have done is they have left home, and they've gone from home into homelessness. So they're no longer householders. They're living a life under a rule, which in the Buddhist in Buddhism is referred to as the Vinaya, and they do that in order to cultivate wisdom. And again, in Buddhism, the kind of goal for that is the alleviation of suffering.
Well, the way I think that is the correct way is that one is a Buddhist, one is practicing, one has decided that this is one's path, one decides that one wants to, this is the most important thing, is to cultivate Buddha Dharma, and is very clear about their teacher, their teachings, everything is there, and they decide that the most effective way to practice would be as a monk, because the biggest distractions in life are job and relationship. So you eliminate job and relationship and totally devote yourself and live within those vows.
Why I think monasticism lends itself to the mystical experience is because the extra stuff of the world is removed.
And then you're supported both psychologically and other ways in that life. So that would be the only real positive motivation.
I came to Kaban Monastery, and then I study here 2-3 years, but sometimes very boring. Oh, now I want to go home, homesick, because that time I don't know anything about Buddhism. So that time I'm a little bit young, Then after 12 years later, but I know something about Buddhism. Now I'm very stable to stay here a long time.
We wake up at 5 o'clock, and then we gather here in the main gompa. First they do is prostrations, do kind of full length prostrations to 35 Buddhas and so forth. And then after that they start to do prayers. Most of the time they start with called the refuge and generating bodhicitta. I take refuge in Buddha, Dharma and Sangha until I'm enlightened by the practicing of giving and so forth. Within that puja also we have breakfast. The monks have tea and bread, and also sometimes people request to make a prayer for those who have obstacles in their life. After that we have a cleaning, and the main Buddhist practice is to keep clean the environment. Not only cleaning inside, the main emphasis is cleaning inside. The cleaning, the real dirt is inside. The attachments, anger, ignorance and so forth. But the thing is also in Buddhism emphasis of cleaning also outside the environment, which helps to clean also inside. Then we have memorization class. During the memorization class, what we do is we memorize the root text. So that after the memorization class, then we have different classes.
We have English, science, math, philosophy, social study, and drawing.
But the reason why we have drawing class is also that some monks who cannot study well in philosophy or mentally, some can be good in drawings and painting. So we give opportunity to them. So like that we have a lunch break. We have different lunch for the students and lunch for the staff and senior monks. And then after the lunch, but again we have different classes. You can see the school. So they follow the schools. They will be studying until 4 o'clock, different languages. Then from 4 o'clock, the main study is then again philosophy. Those who doesn't have philosophy class, they sit in a group or discussion. They do our discussions. The younger one, they all again the chanting or recitations. Then they go until 6:30. So in 6:30 we have dinner. So a little bit break there, 15 minutes, and then after dinner again we have a philosophy class, and then again they have some chanting. For an example of Tara prayers. So then they do a debate. Again debate until 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock debate. Sometimes they keep on going until 10:30 to 11, like that.
And the Vinaya regulates your activities, but it isn't at 6 a.m. you're doing this, at 7 a.m. you're doing this, at 8 a.m. you're doing this. That regulation allows for the space for the mystical experience to happen.
The senior monks, they do meditations. They in the puja also, and also they do practice individually. They have their commitment. They have a commitment, the high tantric practice commitment, and so they have to do every day, in the morning and evening, morning practice and evening practices. So they go to their rooms. Beside that, they practice their sadhana. We call sadhana. So they do their sadhana like that. So that's how we spend our times in monastery. Debate is a special way of learning Buddhist philosophy. One of the special things in Buddhism is that you don't just believe that what Buddha has said. So the thing is that you ask questions why Buddha has said so. Then they put down the left feet down, and then they clap the hand, and then slowly coming up. So what does it mean? Is that you need to generate a motivations. The reason why you are learning to debate is to crush down all the ignorance of all sentient beings.
People have written in the last decade or so about the violence of liberation within the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. That there's a lot of martial vocabulary. Debate is a very aggressive form of study and cultivation that again seems at odds with the ways in which we understand, we collectively understand what Buddhists are doing.
It looks very harsh when you see the debating, even some pulling here, or even you do see like that. If you are not able to give the answer, they call cha, which means shame. That's quite rough and tough. But the main challenging is you're challenging your own ignorance. Though it seems like very rough, tough from outside, like almost like having a martial art. But internally, they're very, they're very happy, and sometimes even when the argument is very tough, you can see the faces are quite tough. You can see it's not always the positive, but the thing is, main purpose is to study, to sharpen your mind, and then eliminate your darkness of ignorance, and then gain the wisdom in order to benefit all sentient beings. So you see, without the concentrations, without the mindfulness, you cannot do. So there should be a mindfulness and then concentrations, and as well as then your debating on that subject.
Buddhism, in the ways that we understand it, can only arise with urbanization. So the reason why it emerges at the time that it does, in the form that it does, is precisely because there's a fair amount of urbanization going on in India, and part of what's involved with that is surpluses. So in a formal Marxist sense, monks are parasites, right? They do not produce anything.
A Buddhist monk should actually be by definition useless to society, a secular, productive society. What they have to contribute is immense if you understand the spiritual path, which is even a higher and greater contribution, even if they're not teaching or engaged in certain things. The fact that they're cultivating the path, that can be appreciated.
When we refer to them as being homeless, it's not that they are without a place to stay. It's that they don't own this property, that they're outside the community. They're outside the formal kind of land reproducing system. So the monasteries are deeply embedded within the community and outside it at the same time.
Monasticism, first we have to do, it's absolutely fundamental and essential. Without monks, nuns, you don't really have a dharma. You don't really have without a proper sangha, it's not a central land. It's very, very important. Very, very important. It's been for many people, it's been very difficult to maintain that in the West because, like I said, of the lack of support, psychological as well as financial.
So again, I think we in the US tend to see it as a vocation. We tend to see it as a rejection of the modern world, and it's not. The monks checking Facebook, for example, I think is emblematic of that. There's some questions that are different for monks and nuns in the contemporary moment than they are for non-monastics. So the religion is something that the lay folk support, because if I'm a layperson and I give you, a monk, food, then this is a good act and I receive merit. So it functions in an economy of karma. You do good, good things happen to you either in this life or the next life. You do bad, bad things happen to you.
Death comes at any time, so it's good to seize the time and do it now. But India supports that as well. They know this is a mendicant. Mendicant's a good thing, and the world would be a dark place without spiritual wanderers.
Monks are teachers, so they teach the community things that the community wants to hear, that is good for the kind of pacific relations within the community. And in the kind of formal sense, then this means monks are the ones who teach the Dharma. Right? They support Buddhism and they teach the Dharma. The Dharma is the teachings of the Buddha. In a slightly broader sociological sense, monks have been repositories of different forms of knowledge. They've been healers, they've been astronomers or astrologers. Just as in Europe, monasteries were places where you could learn building kinds of trades, artistic kinds of trades, as part of the less formal training that would happen.
But as far as what's produced, people living in the vows and contemplating, I think it balances out the universe, it balances out the world somehow. And certainly the use can also be because some people do get realizations, and whether they become teachers or whether they become expounders of the Dharma, which has immense benefit, The Dalai Lama has benefited countless people from all walks of life who have no particular interest in Buddhism.
There are monks who ordain normally as novices for an education. There are monks who ordain in order to study the Dhamma, to engage in this kind of religious quest. There are monks who ordain to make merit for their parents.
The younger one, the beginners one, they will start with the alphabet, the Tibetan alphabet, and then to how to read and write, and then they start with the praise of Manjushri. The reason why they start with praise of Manjushri is the Manjushri is believed to be the wisdom god.
They're not fully ordained monks because you have to be 20 to take the full.
Right. But
They're novice monks, or sometimes they have 5 vows and they wear the robes. But yeah, I mean, it's a good education. It's a nice group of people. Anything that's a higher level and a more subtle, you're bound to be happy. It's a nice place. Also, you have to keep in mind, Lama Yeshe. Well, sometimes people will find the kids it's almost brutal, in the monastery if they break the rules or something. Even great saint like Lama Yeshe, bam, But one of the punishments used to be that Lama had them doing if they really screwed up and they did something wrong, would be to carry these buckets of water to fill the Tara pond. There wasn't just running water anywhere. They would be up and down that hill, and that's exactly, if they weren't in this monastery and they were up in the mountains in Solo Khumbu, they would be carrying loads the rest of their lives. Do you want to carry loads the rest of your life, or do you want to take it to a higher level? So it was the perfect punishment, because it's a little reminder. You're offering water to Tara, and you're also doing exactly clear, like, why am I here? So it can be it's a nice place to be, a monastery, compared to some grungy place maybe way up in the mountains with not such good food or real poverty or a very good education and much that's interesting,
So they're happy. 9 years old, the young monks.
Are they the youngest?
Yeah.
9 years old is the youngest?
5, 6. So he says, I'm very happy here, he doesn't want to go to home. They have playmates, lots of playmates. And then they enjoy it. I mean, though it's a very hardship, waking up in the morning, 5 o'clock, until, the younger one, we let them sleep a little earlier.
The Vinaya does a couple different things. One, it regulates the institution. It is about regulating the actions of the monks or the nuns in order to foster wisdom, and it regulates the relations between the monks and the nuns, the Sangha, and the lay community.
Brahmana is primarily studies on logic. So we spend about 3 years. It's about onologies, epistemologies, and logic. And then secondly, we study about the paramita, prashna paramita. It's about related studies on bodhisattva. And we study about 5 years to 7 years. And then we study about madhyamika, studies on emptiness. We study about 4 years. And then we study about Abhidharma Kosha. Abhidharma Kosha is about the phenomenology. We spend about 4 years again. And then Vinaya, studies on, that is about the conduct, discipline. So 4 years. So it's all together we spend about 15 to 21 years.
In general terms, a lineage is a line of teachers and students that goes back presumably to the Buddha, but it is a community of monks who have the same teacher, and that teacher had that that teacher had a teacher who had a teacher who had a teacher, ad infinitum. So while in some sense a lineage is just a chain of teachers, it also spreads out because my teacher had a whole bunch of other students. And so we're siblings in a sense. You can trace your lineage in a straight line, in you know, kind of go into the taproot, or in an arboreal fashion in all sorts of, you know, all sorts of ways.
As soon as the monastic order started spreading to other countries, especially in the Mahayana, it went to Tibet, which was basically a feudal culture. No longer were monks beings who could just go out and beg for their food, and if there's no food given, they move on to another place. Because of the weather, because of the history, because of everything, they moved into big, huge institutions, and institutions are full of all of the corruptions and money and all the things that are involved with institutions. That doesn't mean there weren't some incredible gems, some really, in general, I find in Tibetan Buddhism, there's just these most precious, precious beings. But there's a lot of stuff also. There's a lot of politics and a lot of things that are blatantly, you know, kind of not the best. Lama Yeshe said, yeah, those things are all there, just don't focus on that, you know.
Buddhism has a fair amount of that gendered hierarchy embedded in it. There are texts that argue that only a man can become a Buddha. You get more merit from giving to an old wise monk than you do from giving to a young monk. In the same way, you get more merit from giving to a young monk than you do by giving to a woman, to a nun. And so you'll have female renunciants who are essentially novices, who, in the kind of pecking order of meritorious gifts, they're at the bottom of the pecking order because they're novices and they're women. This kind of set of gender hierarchies collides in particularly complicated ways with late 20th century liberatory feminist ideologies, which are supported by both men and women in particular locations. And there are efforts that many people have engaged in trying to reestablish female ordination, to make sure that young women who ordain receive full and proper support.
Debate classes we have here in the monasteries and also in the nunneries. All the curriculums, all the studies exactly same. There's no difference. Even the nuns nowadays they are doing much better. Really.
The nuns who come into this tend to be more focused on kind of the religious aspects of it. They tend to be better educated because they've been through, you know, they've been through high school at a bare minimum. Many of them have been to college, and they decide that they don't want to. It's like getting married when you're in your 30s as opposed to when you're 18. You know why you're doing it.
But in Gelugpa emphasize first study. Without study, then you meditate. What you are going to meditate? There's nothing to meditate. So first you have to know the subject very well. Then you can contemplate what you have learned. Yeah, then what you have studied. Then try to familiarize that into your heart.
The idea is that this is what monks are supposed to do. They're supposed to study the Dharma and meditate. You no longer farm. You no longer are a carpenter. You no longer do these things. What you do, what you're responsible for, is these two activities.
So the main purpose of studying is not to become pride. So that, I mean, there's a problem. It's not that always it's easy. When you have more wisdom, when you have more knowledge, sometimes there's a danger that I'm learned, I'm more scholar, I'm more clever than you.
But it can be a deception. can be a lure because of it's so blissful, apparently. So every once in a while the Buddha would have to put something like that straight. So in one of the stories of the Buddha, he came to the river, and there was a man on the river who would practice one-pointed concentration to where he could walk on the water. He said, I practiced for 20 years and I can walk across the river. And Lord Buddha said, well, you wasted 20 years for 5 paisa, you could take the ferry boat. You know, it's a great one, you know. I was like, yeah.
The meditative practices are replicatable. That what the Buddha says, what the Buddha is said to have said is, if you don't believe me, do it, and you'll find that I'm right? This is a repeatable experience, and most people I know who've done this explain, who are good at this, say that, in fact, these things are true. And so I presume that there are physiological processes that the act of meditation engage, which can then be interpreted in fairly consistent ways.
The practice, we have to be very mindful in every situation, whether we are doing meditations or not. Now I'm meditating, I'm doing it like this. And during even these conversations, I have to be careful. And every moment, the practice is every moment there. So every moment can lead, or even the teacher, or I'm teaching, now I have many disciples, it can be pride. So it's practicing is not so easy. So whether you are in the debate, whether you are in the studies, or every single moment, so there is always practice.
And so meditation is not easy, requires an intense amount of work and practice before a mystical experience, if we might say, can happen.
You have this phenomena of single-pointed concentration, samadhi, shine, and then access to the jhanas, access to the absorptions. And probably only in 2 religious traditions, the Hindu and the Buddhist, they have these outlined, a map, step by step by step, what occurs at each step, which clairvoyance comes, which power comes, power over the elements. And the training on how to become a bodhisattva is like the self-cherishing mind becomes the obstacle to becoming enlightened. And the self-cherishing mind is the devil in Buddhism, the one that wants me first, me first, me first. And the mind that cherishes others is always happy, it's always spontaneous. It's always, everybody wants to be around someone like that.
The vast majority of mystics are highly disciplined individuals. And by disciplined, I don't mean they get up at the same time every day and they work, but rather they have been trained, they have been disciplined within a particular context. And in a sense, this is the whole purpose of the Vinaya and the whole purpose of the rule of St. Benedict. So that discipline gets rid of the extra crap in life and allows them to understand the true nature of things, right? So a mystical experience doesn't happen like just walking down the street. They happen in a very specific, culturally ordered context, which allows the mystic to engage in kind of the flights of the soul. I think mystical activity, mystical experiences, are really only made sense of in that highly disciplined framework.